Welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of the Structural Sense podcast. Hopefully this one will be up on time. What was that?
5.
I'm sorry about him. I don't know what to say. Hopefully this will be up on time for you guys. We had some technical difficulties. Stop it. With the last episode, we did finally manage to get it up, so hopefully you guys have had a chance to go and check that out. If not, go and do it. I think it's one of Ryan's best rants so far. We'll try to improve on that as we go forward, but
It's a good rant.
he's a bit touchy on supplements, so he got pretty wound up about that one. As always, I'm at Steve Sansford. He's at Ryan from work. And Ryan actually came up with a topic for this week's podcast. So if you have any problems with that guy right there. So Ryan, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about, I don't know, which one do you want? There was the 2 that I gave you.
The one about flexibility.
Yeah, we can go with flexibility.
Because as you guys noticed, we have our proper green screen back.
Yeah.
And the other day on Friday, we were right there on that thing. And Ryan said something to me that didn't make any sense. It's funny, Ryan says a lot of things to me that don't make any sense. But this particularly didn't make any sense. He said, I have good mobility, but poor flexibility.
Yes.
What the hell does that mean?
All right. There's a big difference between the 2.
Okay,
right?
Then lay it out for me, because I don't understand, and I'm sure there's more than one person listening to this podcast.
For sure.
Assuming there's more than one person listening to this podcast that also says what's the difference between mobility and flexibility.
Yeah.
Explain it for us.
So as you guys noticed,
We're trying something
we
different.
just completely changed things up here.
Because Ryan attempted to explain this using words, and he failed.
Yep.
He said we need to demonstrate it. So
For sure. Right, so Steve asked the question, what's the difference between flexibility and mobility? All right, so what we did here is we're going to set up an exercise for you guys. One of Steve's favorite exercises. One of all my clients' favorite exercises.
nobody likes this exercise.
No one likes it. But it's one of the most beneficial exercises for any person. It's the front foot elevated split squat. And the reason why I do this specific movement with the majority of my clients is, 1, it's difficult to perform, right? 2, there are certain muscles in the body that when you work them, they actually benefit the body more, right? So specifically, this movement will help the VMO, vastus medialis, which is the teardrop knee muscle that connects in and helps with knee health. The other reason too is it promotes flexibility in the hips. So if you do any sort of sitting, right, or a large portion of sitting, what ends up happening is the fascia that sits in the hip, picture it like your pant leg being scrunched up, right? When it does that, what ends up happening is you lean forward more, right? Mm-hmm. You create more of a tilt, right? What we're trying to do with this movement is open up the hip and create more longer fascia so that way you have more space in the hip to perform more mobile exercises, right? So what I was mentioning to Steve was that he was more mobile than flexible, right? And this has to do with specific areas in his body. We'll get Steve to really quickly perform the front foot elevated split squat. All right, so he's here. Not really in good attire, but it works.
Better not rip my shorts, I'll be pissed.
you're gonna sweat. Right, so he's basically coming straight down and pushing straight up, right? What we're looking for here is that the knee can pass over the toe, right? And chest up, shoulders back, right? He's got a straight back. The glute is in front of the back leg. So as you guys can notice, as far as Steve, for the most part, he's pretty mobile, right? He can move in those positions. You're actually pretty good at the exercise now, right?
It's been a while.
Yep.
Still hurts.
Exactly. But as far as flexibility is concerned, because we're on a riser, you can't actually achieve the same movement from the ground. The reason as to why is because the flexibility in your hips aren't as good as they should be. Right, so say for instance, I was to perform this movement, right? If I'm on a riser, it would look simply like this, same thing. But if you notice my range of motion, right, I'm a lot more straighter in the back leg. Okay? Now, let's move this aside. Right. If you perform it from the bottom end, and this is more or less an exercise that will show you the mobility of a person and the flexibility as far as if they're able to perform a specific move, right? So this exercise once you can perform it from the floor, right, that means that you can squat from the floor as well. So if I were to actually take the same positioning, right, and sit straight down, right, I can actually attain that same position. So flexibility-wise, you don't have the flexibility for it yet, but mobility-wise, you have the mobility. Does that make more sense?
That makes sense to me.
Awesome, right? So
it doesn't make sense to you.
It gives
That's
you
what
guys
the comment
an idea.
section's for.
Exactly, right? And that can be translated out to a lot of different exercises as well, right? When it comes down to other specific things, upper body and all the above, it can translate out that way as well.
So we stepped back out of our blue screen, back into our chairs, and just had a demonstration there on flexibility versus mobility. That cleared it up for me, hopefully cleared it up for you. But talk a bit more now about mobility and flexibility and why they're important.
Sure.
For day-to-day things.
So let's go out further as far as age.
Further.
Yes. Let's assume that a person is laying in their deathbed. Why would they be there in the first place?
Because they're dying.
Okay. But normally if they're in their deathbed, what can't they do?
My guess would be move.
Exactly. So mobility and flexibility are just as important as strength, because in the position that it is, the reason as to why someone is in their deathbed is because they're not mobile enough, they're not flexible enough, and they're not strong enough to move anymore. Right?
Okay.
So that's why it's so important as far as overall. But in our day-to-day, you get a lot of people, for instance, that pull their back out doing the most ridiculous things. I had a friend of mine, I had a friend of mine who pulled her back out tying her shoe, and she was out for 8 weeks.
I sneezed once. That was fun.
Right? And those are situations that, they're everyday things, and it's not like it's going to happen to everyone, but if it does happen, it's catastrophic, right? You're missing work, you can't sit properly, you're uncomfortable, all of the above. So as far as mobility is concerned and flexibility is concerned, they're important because you need it to survive, right? Now, on the flip side, as far as why it's important in the fitness industry or important in the fitness world, is because the more mobile and flexible you are with stability, right? The more mobile and flexible you are with stability, right, the easier it is for you to perform specific exercises.
Okay.
The idea is that what you want to have is enough mobility and flexibility that you can perform the most difficult exercises, because the most difficult exercises for a person will get them to the maximum result. Let's say, for instance, you're split squatting,
Okay.
right? And you're achieving, 25 pounds in each hand, let's say, for instance. And you're up on 3 risers, right? Now, in order for you to improve that exercise, right, at a certain point you can't hold any more weight. You actually have to reduce it because you need your flexibility, your mobility to increase. Once that increases, basically what I'm saying is the exercises that are going to get you from one place to another aren't the exercises that are going to get you from that place to the next place.
That's true of so many things in life.
Exactly, right? And that's really what it is. It's true on everything, on every single standpoint, right? So, that's part of the reason as to why I wanted to talk about mobility and flexibility, because that can translate out to our lives as well.
Okay, so great. Let's talk about flexibility for a second, because one thing that I don't think we do a whole lot of during the workout routine is stretching. Mm-hmm. There's a bit of pre-workout stretching, some simple exercises that we should show on video, but we can't, but we'll get to that eventually. Maybe we'll do a workout. Why not?
So because of your goals and what it is you're looking for. So Steve's goals are overall strength, flexibility, right? Weight loss, all the above.
Yep.
Right? So because I know that, a lot of the exercises I do, well, one, right? Because you pay per hour, right? It's,
good point.
It's easier for me to give a person homework and have them go do stretching than sit there for an hour and stretch them.
You just send me home to stretch against a door frame.
Exactly, right? So I do give Steve some exercises to do, some hip stretches, some chest stretches, in order for him to actually benefit from it. But the other thing that I do is, the reason as to why I do specific exercises like split squats, and you continuously see them in every single program, is because of the dynamic stretching that it does already. Now, this is the important thing, and this is what people don't realize. I get a lot of clients, for instance, that always say, oh, I don't have time to stretch, or, if I just stretch right now, right beforehand, that should be enough. The ridiculous thing about that, and what people don't realize, is stretching is exactly like exercise. It requires a certain amount of time spent on it in order for you to get more flexible, right? For exercise, it requires an extended amount of time for you to master that exercise. So it works exactly the same way. You have to spend time doing it. What I normally tell people is, if it is the case, right, go do it somewhere fun. Go take yoga. Go do something with a family, for instance. That way, you get a benefit of it, but at the same time, it's enjoyable. Right? It's got to be enjoyable. That's the biggest thing. And a lot of people don't find stretching enjoyable because it's boring.
It's very boring.
Right?
Yeah.
Another thing I've told some of my clients is get rid of the couch in their house. Get a couple mats.
Yep.
And every single time you watch TV, you read a book, you listen to an audio, stretch instead. Right?
Get rid of my desk chair and stretch while I'm editing this podcast.
Yeah.
If that would work.
That's
There may be a future podcast episode on that.
But I mean, a lot of it is people are lazy and wanting to do it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's part of the reason as to why people have trainers.
Yep.
Right? So you can work it at the same time. Now, there are some specific things that you can do that are more specialized. There's a course called kinetic chain enhancement, where certain pressure points in specific areas you press on will increase your flexibility like that.
Interesting.
Yep. That course is very expensive. I plan on taking it. But it's about $7,000, right? But they teach you specific things, how to more or less get someone flexible. And so instead of spending that much time working on you, 10, 15 minutes opening up your hips just so you can attain a specific position, I press on a couple pressure points and you're able to do it like that.
Interesting
right?
shortcut.
So it's definitely worth it. But it's one of those things, again, that, it's an expense as far as the cost.
So taking the flexibility and mobility further into everyday life, what are some specific situations you've encountered that flexibility has been an asset? Being more flexible would be an asset to help out, if you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm sure there's people that are saying, well, I'm flexible enough, I can touch my toes. Because that seems to be the big benchmark for flexibility. Is, can you bend down and touch your toes? I can't. I couldn't touch my toes to save my life. It took us an hour. It took us an hour and a half. But we got it. We managed. I shouldn't say I can't. It took an hour and a half of stretching and movement to be able to get me to do it. I've never been able to do it before. That's pretty huge. But then there's somebody like Jennifer, gets out of bed, wakes up, bends over, and practically touches the floor with the back of her palms. It's that different. How does that translate into? Is that a true measure of flexibility? Is there, like, if you can touch your toes, are you a flexible person? And how does that translate into everyday life?
I would say that would be a short measure, or a not short measure. Word I'd be looking for, a regular measure. I would say if you can't touch your toes, it's you would be average to touch your toes. So how in medical terms sometimes they have like a range?
Yeah.
That'd be like the very bottom range, right? The bottom where like you're actually not in the range, but you're.
So I'm not even on the chart yet.
Right. Exactly. No, and that's honest, but there's optimal ranges.
Yep.
Right. Now there is being over flexible. Right.
How is that a problem?
That's a problem because if you're over flexible, majority of the time you're also not stable. Right. So
is this like contortionist level of over flexible, or?
To an extent, yes. However, obviously they're trained athletes.
They're very trained, yes.
Right? But what you find in the body, specifically how it works, is you find every single point, it goes mobility to flexibility, right? It literally goes stability and then mobility, right? So in the wrist, it's mobility.
Right.
In the elbow, it's flexibility, right? Or sorry, in the elbow, it's stability. Right? Same thing with the shoulder, mobility, right? And then same thing when it comes down the leg, it goes stability in the ankle, mobility in the knee, right? So it's just how the body's formed. Now, getting back to as far as
being over flexible,
yeah, you can be over flexible and it can cause issues because obviously there's specific areas you don't want to be over flexible, and if you are over flexible in those areas, you're more prone to injury
because you don't have the stability.
Yes. The stability.
And we all know how important stability is.
Exactly. Right. And same thing, as far as like the actual numbers or the guidelines, when it comes down to it, there are specific ranges when it comes down to like knee flexibility, right, and shoulder flexibility, right, that are required in order for you to attain certain things. A lot of it is used through exercise in a sense, right? So if you can move in specific ways, so an overhead press or a behind the head overhead press, you know, just overall squatting, depending on how much of your, call it a butt wink, right? How the hip will actually wink over, right? Depending on how much that happens, determines whether or not you're too flexible or not flexible enough. You know, even in the position that a person goes to squat and they bend over, right? That's caused by not being flexible enough, right? So there are specific parameters and assessments that a person can do in order to know whether or not they have the proper mobility and flexibility.
Okay, so you've explained how stability, mobility, and flexibility affect the body. How do those two elements affect mindset?
Wow.
You didn't know that was coming.
No.
No, but as
you
I'm
were
listening
saying
to you
it.
talk, I'm thinking about the flexibility of the mind and the stability of the mind, and not so much the mobility of the mind, but just the having an open mindset.
That's what I was
kind
going
of
to
thing.
say.
So
Yeah.
touch on those three things from a personal development point.
Yeah, I was going to say the mobility could probably have to do with the whole concept of being open-minded, right?
Somebody once told me the mind works a lot like a parachute.
Yeah, it works better when it's open, right? But when it comes down to that, I mean, we're in an ever-changing world. You know,
It's the only thing you can count on in this world is change.
I wish I had my notebook with me. A gentleman named Rip Mason went over a bunch of statistics on how quickly information just processes nowadays.
Yep.
Right? And what was it? It was ridiculous. He said there's enough, you could process information by the year of, I forget what it was, but basically it was even within 10 to 20 years. The information that is available now could be processed within seconds.
Yeah.
Right? That's how quick and how fast our technology is getting.
Process information.
Right? So, you know, when it comes down to the mobility of the mind, right? I would say, yeah, being open-minded, being able to understand that things are changing, things are different nowadays. You know, if I could go this far into it, and we were talking about this the other day, people are more interested nowadays in finding different types of education, right?
Yeah.
They're not necessarily stuck on going to school. Not that school is bad or anything like that, right?
Yes, it is, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay, you're going to go that route. I'm going to be the good guy in the situation.
You want to hear me rant? Then we go on about the education system.
But yeah, like, you know, there's other ways to get education nowadays, right? And you got to be open-minded to that. You know, as far as even being a personal trainer, there's practicality to it. You know, you can go get a kinesiology degree and it's going to do great for you, right? It's going to probably get you places. But if you want to come into the training atmosphere and think that you know everything, it's not going to happen, right? You have to keep developing yourself. We live in an age now where like education's key in continuing education, right? You see it all the time, even when it comes down to people that are doctors nowadays. Yep. They have to go to seminars all the time to find out what's new and what's changing. Exactly. So it's important to be mobile in your mind in that sense, right? Now, flexible. As far as flexibility, I would say that would have to be with being flexible with things that happen in life.
I would also say it's got to be flexible to the fact that there may be a different way of doing something, or somebody may have a different way of doing something that you're doing. But it doesn't mean it's wrong.
No.
And I've noticed that here in our green screen. There are a dozen different trainers that work out here, and they all have different ways of doing things. And I know you guys don't always agree on the best way to do a split squat, or whether a split squat is the best way to attain what we're looking for. Opinions differ. But personal trainers, they are flexible people. They have flexible minds. You can accept the fact that Dan may have a different way to do it than you. And I bring that up. We featured him on a podcast a couple weeks ago. Go check out his stuff. Dan and Ryan may have different opinions on the way things are done, but they can still work well together because they're flexible enough in their mindset to realize that, hey, there is a different way to do that.
Yeah. My big thing when it comes down to that is, I mean, don't look at the world through a straw, right? You have to keep, again, learning. You got to keep continuing your education in whatever it is that you're doing.
Yep.
Right. So, when it comes down to it, I personally, when it comes down to my style of training, I train almost every single one of my clients like they're an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
They perform athletic-based exercises. And the reason as to why is because athletes are the true measure of strength, flexibility, and mobility.
Sure.
Right? So, you want to get a person to move like an athlete. Now, they might not be able to perform like an athlete.
Right.
Right? But the more mobile and the more strong they are, the longer they're going to live. Right? Sure. So, yeah, it's, being flexible in the sense of just understanding that, again, everything's changing. Right? Now, talking about stability.
Stability of the mind. That's a deep subject.
That is a big one. And I would say it has to do with the book that I'm reading right now that's been referred to everyone as far as anyone that's successful, The One Thing. Right?
I have the sample on my Kindle. I haven't got the rest of it yet, but
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot of good things about it.
In the very first chapter, they just talk about how everybody wants to do everything. Right? And it's not about necessarily doing everything. It's taking one thing and focusing on the small one thing that it is and creating that and causing a compound effect in that sense.
Yeah.
So creating stability in the sense of being able to focus is, I think, what it should be for the mind, right? When it comes down to stability.
I was sitting here trying to rack my brain for all the books I've read to something that would be a good analogy to talking about the flexibility, mobility, stability of the mind. But yeah, one thing that's, from what I've read about so far, that's the book.
That's the book.
There's your homework assignment, kids. Go get The One Thing. Check it out.
Going small is a simple approach to extraordinary results, and it works. It works all the time, anywhere, on anything. Why? Because it has only one purpose: to ultimately get to the point. When you go small as possible, you'll be staring at the one thing, and that's the point. Right?
You don't have to think about it that way. When you think of everything you want to accomplish in life or what your goals are in life, you tend to think bigger is better. But you've got to realize that bigger is better, yes, but bigger and better takes your focus.
Yes. Yeah.
Off that one thing that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. And that's what they really say. They say that when you wake up in the morning, focus on that one thing that's going to progress you in life.
Yep.
Right. Whether or not it actually happens right then and there, or whether or not that it happens down the road. What's that one thing you can do to, build your business and make it go faster? What's the one thing you can do to, progress you in overall whatever it is that you're doing, right? What was that one thing?
Reminds me of Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog.
Yeah.
Make it up in the morning, the first thing you do.
Yeah.
Eat the frog.
Exactly.
Knock out that one thing that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And if that's all you did that day, you're on the path to success.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I think that's going to about do it for this week's episode. We're going to close out with 30 seconds for Ryan's tip of the week.
Completely forgot we were doing that.
This is like the 6th time we've done it.
Yeah.
Tip of the week. What is it? 140 characters or less. We'll tweet it out after the show.
Everything that we just talked about, right? Don't necessarily work on the flexibility, mobility, and stability in your personal fitness, but work on the flexibility, the mobility, and the stability on your mindset, right? On your brain,
on your life. That's good stuff. But yeah, that's going to do it for episode 5 of the Structural Sense podcast. Be up on YouTube, iTunes, and SoundCloud very soon. I think this may be the last episode that is actually going to be up on SoundCloud specifically for a while. We're getting a lot more viewers on the YouTube platform, a lot more interaction on the YouTube platform. That seems to be where most people are watching this content. And we want to start doing more visuals, like you just saw back there on our green screen right there. But of obviously much better quality. I don't know how well that one turned out. We are using a webcam. We're going to rectify that for next week's episode. We're going to use it proper.
That's improv right
there. It's 100% improv right there. You know that wasn't planned because it's probably so out of focus. We just look like an orange blob moving up and down. We're going to get that better for you guys, some better audio, better picture. We already got the equipment. We just have to roll it out and really focus on bumping up the quality of these YouTube presentations. That's not to say the audio is not going to be on SoundCloud or iTunes. It will be because, hey, why not? It doesn't cost anything to put it there. But to get the real experience out of this and to see the visuals, you're going to want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search for Structural Sense on YouTube. You'll find it. So until next week, as always, I'm at Steve Sansford. He's at Ryan from work. And remember, the mind must be right or the body never will be. Bye for now.